Hello crafty friend, it's me Justine and I'm here for part 2 for my stitching series. This will be everything you need to know for stitching. Now my desk looks a little bit crazy because I have a lot planned for this video. So I know it's going to be a long one. I'm going to be showing you all of the ways that I stitch and I'm going to do this project start to finish. So it's going to be a long one, so grab a snack, grab a drink, and we will go ahead and get started. So I oftentimes get questions about stitching and I just thought it would be fun to do a completely from the beginning, so from die cutting to gluing on projects, how I do this. So here we go. Now I wanted to start with this little flower because my first stitch that I'm going to do today is called the circle stitch or the round stitch, because we're going to go from the center to the outside for every stitch on this little flower die. And and I will link all the products that I'm using in the description if you're interested. They are mostly affiliate links, which helps my channel. So if you use those, I get a little kickback. It doesn't cost you anything extra. Now that we have that out of the way, if you missed part 1, make sure to go to part 1. It's about 24 minutes long and it tells you about all the materials. So I'm not going to tell you about all the materials since I already covered that. So let's get to die cutting. I'm just going to put this little stitching die through my Sidekick. This is my mini die cutting machine. It gets a lot of love. But for stitching and it's something small, I just use my Sidekick. So I have my stitching die like this. You can see some of the holes did not pop out and that's just fine. I'm going to pop them out with my 2-in-1, which you just kind of rake it over the edge like that, and they all pop out. If you don't have a 2-in-1, you could use a pokey tool. Let's see, where is mine? Well, this is still a 2-in-1, but there's other tools I have, there's the pokey part, and you can sit there and pop those out if you want. But for me, the rake works really good. So let's just start with this guy and finish up this card. So I wanted to make this flower to go over this one. I know that is a pretty flower, but I thought this card was kind of missing something when I made it, and I think a stitch flower would be perfect right there. Plus the colors, it all works, you know. The little panda's legs move, so this is a really fun card. If you want to know how I made this one, check out the channel. Check out my video on the channel that has the dinosaurs and pandas on it. I think it's called Monster Birthday. So let's just dive right in. So splitting thread. I know a lot of people have asked questions about that. I'm not going to split thread for this one because I'm using the metallic Dynamant thread from DNC. It's D168. So it is single thread already. I'm not going to separate anything there. Now I do get a lot of questions because when people stitch with this metallic thread, it is super bouncy. And I told you I have a hack for that. Do you remember the hack? Thread magic. So this is a thread conditioner. All you do is pop the end of the thread in. You can sit there and feed it through these little sides. I don't, but you could. I just kind of stick it on there, put the cap kind of on a little bit, but not like, you don't have to be too dramatic about it. And just pull it through, and that is going to give the thread a little bit of a condition and a waxy, it's not wax, but it's kind of like a waxy texture. So that is perfect for starting out my stitch. Now you can see that's already unwinding a little bit. So what I'm going to do to this end is just take my thumb and look at that. Fixed, basically. So now I just need my needle. And I actually popped my needle minder on here, but I might use my magnet as well. I forgot that I even had this in my craft room, and after the live that I did with Melanie, I remembered to pull it out. So now we're going to use it. So to thread your needle, I know I showed you my favorite one from DMC in part 1. I lost it. I don't know where it is, so I'm using this cheapo one, and it works just fine. So there you have it. Should I have done that slower? Okay, to thread a needle, if you don't know, put the needle threader through the eye of the needle, put your thread through the needle threader, like a good tail, I guess, and then hold your needle threader and pull the needle off of the needle threader, and you have it threaded. Sometimes I just like to pinch it and use my fingers, but I'm showing you all sorts of tips and tricks here, so I figured why not. Okay, now for starting projects, this is a pretty solid piece here. So I'm actually going to use tape, which is the first way that I like to finish and start projects. So I'll show you a whole bunch of different ways, but this first one we'll use tape. I'm using the Spellbinders Best Ever Craft Tape and just taping the tail to the back. I have to make sure that the tail isn't too long for the taped method, and I probably will end up trimming just a little bit of that because I don't want those little whiskers to poke out through the front. And then I'll trim the tape so it doesn't show through any of the holes, just basically to hold it on, like so. Okay, now we can stitch, and when I have something this small, I kind of like to make the tail on my needle a little bit longer because it's less to go in and out with, if that makes sense. Okay, now the back is where my thread is right now. So every time my thread is on the back, you want to take your needle up through the outside. Now this is the round stitch. Remember, everything's going around the main center hole. And there's other dies like this one, which I'm going to do in a couple minutes, where there is an oblong kind of a leaf pattern, but all of these are going around and into that center. So I call that a round stitch as well, or a circle stitch, even though it isn't a circle. I mean, the flower isn't either, but it's going around the main hole. So, like I said, threads on the back, let's come up. It does not matter where you start, especially for this die, and you come up, pull your thread tight. See how there's not this big loop on the back? You don't want it loopy because it won't be flat-ish at the end. Okay, so now my thread's on the top, so I want to come down through the center and pull. Now, if you've done metallic thread, you see how bouncy it kind of gets. You can go ahead and do maybe 1 or 2 stitches like this, up through the outside again, and you can get it nice and tight. And with this thread magic on there, that is helping, even though you can't see it, it's clear, but it is helping your stitch stay. Now, if you can see my other fingers here, is they're holding the thread tight, and that really does help as well. So you just kind of have to hold it and pull, and remember to go up the outside and down through the center every time. And if they're not laying flat, you can kind of take your needle like that and just kind of tell them who's boss and put them in line. And pull tight again. You can see that the flower is coming together. So that's wonderful. And I'm just going to go around and do the same thing all the way around my flower. We got a new grandfather clock. Can you hear it? I am still upstairs in my craft room, and that clock will be louder when I move downstairs, but I love it. Okay, we're going around and around. Taking this one and going around. So I've gone maybe about 9 stitches so far, and this is really not taking too long. I know I've been stitching quite a while now, so I do stitch a little fast. So if you are just starting and you're not as fast as I am, that's okay. Take your time, enjoy, play around. I absolutely love taking stitching on the go. So once summer kind of gets going, I'm going to make a video about what is in my stitching on the go box. I've talked about it on my channel before, but it's been about a year since I've talked about it, so I figured I might as well talk about it again and kind of give a refresh, because I've gained I think 1,500 people since then, so welcome if you are new. I really do appreciate everyone who has subscribed and left a comment on my video. It is just so fun doing this, and I really appreciate all of the support and the new friends. I've made a lot of new friends with this, so thank you. Okay, so that was my last stitch on my flower, and I ended in the back. You want to always end in the back, so if you think you're done and you're in the front, something happened. Okay, now to end a piece, you can use tape like I started, which you can do, but I'm not going to do on this one. On this one, I'm going to take the stitch and do a back stitch. So it does not matter really where it goes. I'm just going to stick it through a few threads like that, pull tight, and then I'm going to stitch again from the same direction. Notice I'm not going this way again. I'm going away from myself and pull tight. And I like to do probably 3 or 4 of those just to get it pretty secure, especially with the metallic thread. So that is all set. I'm going to leave the tail to be longer than you might think. I'm not going to cut it right here, but I don't want to leave it long because then you can see it in the back. So I'll just leave it maybe about a 1/2 inch. And now my flower is all set. Isn't that cute? Okay, well, stick my needle there so I don't lose it. Let's go ahead and add this to the card so we can kind of clean up my area a little bit. This has been quite the project prepping for this video, so I hope that I cover everything. If I don't and you have questions, please leave it in the comments. Okay, so now to glue this on or add this onto my card, I am going to use liquid glue. I use Barely Art liquid glue. I just put it in this little bottle for convenience, but this is what the big bottle looks like. It comes with a stainless steel tip, and it is very, very easy to use these. I absolutely love this glue. It's the only glue that I will even spend money on. So it is essential for card making, and it's kind of a fun extra thing for stitching that helps make things a little easier. So what I'm going to do is add a pretty generous amount of glue there and then add it onto my project directly like that. Now it will take a second or two for that to really stick and do anything, so don't be picking it up and waving it around anytime soon, but know that it is sticking on. Okay, next I'm going to get some jewels because I love embellishing cards with some bling bling. So I'm going to use the yellow because I have yellow on the back of these flowers, and I think that that will just look appropriate. I just need one, and I'll put that right on the center. It's always good to cap your glue when you're done, and it helps too if you put your glue upside down like that, and it does not clog as often. Okay, it took me a second there to find my gem picker, so my glue actually fell through that hole. So I'm going to add just a little bit more glue and pop my gem on like so. And the liquid glue does dry clear, so if you're concerned about things showing, don't worry about it. So there's a look at my finished little flower and my super cute little panda with his swinging legs. Okay, let's move to the next one before I get more distracted with my panda. Okay, that was a circle stitch. Let's do the fan stitch next. I have a little Christmas card planned out. I know. It's January, but we're going to go with it. Here is the DMC thread. This one is 92. I figured I'd show you how I take this off of the loop without it getting to be a disaster. So if you don't have your thread on little spools like this yet, and you just have these, maybe you just started stitching, you can go ahead and hold your looped string, I guess is what I call it, and then you take this, you pull this one kind of slowly, and you keep applying pressure to this with your hand, and you just kind of gently pull. Gently pull, and you're not going to have a stitching nightmare, which is what I call a knot. And just like that, I have enough thread, at least for what I'm going to do here today. And then my loop thread isn't a disaster. It looks practically new. A little thinner, but goals. Anyway, now let's go ahead and take my thread and split it up, because all of embroidery floss usually comes with 6 strands. So I'm going to show you here on the end all 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can see them all there. And the thread naturally kind of wants to split in 2. So it's not too difficult to see. And now with my nails, it's definitely way easier, but if you just kind of fray the end, you can see all 6 of them there. But for stitching, Spellbinders, which is the company I use a lot of their stuff with, so I kind of go with what they say 2 to 3 threads for stitching. So I like 3, that's what I do. So I take 3 pieces over here, 3 pieces over here. I'm holding the other long tail in this hand. And what I'm going to do with this hand, if you can kind of see, I am untwisting the thread. And you can see this V is getting bigger and bigger. I'm untwisting. And then I'm going to hold it tight, kind of pinch it, grab here, go again, and I'm unwinding, going against how it is wound in the factory, I'm assuming. Okay, pinching again, and then I'm just going to take my tail here and just kind of run my hand through it so it gets to be not too twisty at the end, and just keep on going, unwinding. Over and over until I get to the end. Now, if it's really long like it is here, if I wasn't on camera and I didn't need to show you, I would take my thread here and I would have this piece here hanging free, not touching anything on the side of me here, and I would gently just pull this apart. And if this tail hangs down, gravity lets it unwind as I pull. So I'll just kind of attempt to show you this without it becoming tangled. Just kind of have to help it along sometimes. Like that. Okay, now you have 2 pieces. So you can put one off to the side and you're going to start with one. Now I'm using variegated floss because I thought it would be fun to use a metallic, a variegated, and a solid thread just to show you all the different looks that you can get. So it doesn't matter really what end I'm starting with because the Christmas tree is a solid green, but you can see the different colors here that I could start with. I could start light and go dark, or I could start dark and go light. So, you know, it just kind of depends. But I think what I'm going to do, sorry, I keep hitting this camera. What I'm going to do is start light and work my way down the tree. So here I'll floss, or I'll thread this needle just with my hands. Oh, I almost forgot. Thread magic here. I'm just going to pull it through, get it nice and conditioned. The end got a little weird there. There we go. Okay, now if I'm going to start with the light, I'm going to want that to be my tail. I want this to be connected because that's the color I'm going to start with. If I start with this, or if I thread this area, this is going to be my starting thread. So there is actually a teeny tiny knot at the end of this, so I'm just going to snip it. One of my biggest stitching tips is don't be afraid to cut a knot and just start over. It happens, and I'm not someone who likes to take a lot of time and undo teeny tiny knots. I rather just craft and move on. So that's my 2 cents for you. Okay, threading my needle. You can kind of pinch your fingers like this. This eye is rather small, but whatever. It's my favorite needle and I like it, so I'm using it. And I just kind of twist it into a point and it goes on my needle. So that's an option for you too. Okay, on the back of this one, let's go ahead and you can see I glimmered on the back. This was a scrap and I turned it into this Christmas tree because the glimmer did not turn out perfectly. This isn't special glimmer paper, so it just didn't work well, but it works well for my stitching, so not going to let that go to waste. For starting this one, we're going to do the tail method. So I'm going to leave a pretty generous long tail at the back of this project, and I will tie it off when I am done. So I'm going to go ahead and do my first stitch is going to be here. And I'm actually going to put pencil on my die so you can see where I am going. I'm going to put stitches right like this. I'm going to erase this before I stitch, but you can kind of see those lines are going from the outside and they're going to go into that hole every time. So I hope you can see that. There we go. Okay, now the Spellbinders dies are etched, so they do come with little lines like that, but depending on the paper you use, they don't always show up because of thin paper. Okay, and of course I just made my Christmas tree have a bend, but the show must go on. Okay, I'm going to put my first stitch here on the right, and then I'm going to pull it through, and I'm going to leave a tail. So I'm not using tape this time. This is another way to start. And I'm just going to take my fingers and pinch that thread. And then when I am finished, I will use that to tie it off. So I'm going down through the main hole, up through the outside. And this is what I would call a triangle stitch. There's a whole bunch of stitches going to a main point, but not around the main point. They're kind of flanking it. Always going down the main hole and up through the outside. Like this. Over and over and over. If you find 3 threads to be too puffy, you can go ahead and try 2 or 1 or 6. It just kind of depends on what you want, but I think 3 is what I use, so I'll just tell you that. Okay, so I have my triangle all done. Now, if I was doing this and not showing you different starting and stopping methods, I would go ahead right into my next section. But since I'm showing you the stopping and starting methods, let's show you how to tie off a tail. Now, it's really not complicated at all. You're just going to make a knot with the tail and the thread part of your needle and just tie it off like this. 1 knot, 2 knots. Then when you have it all tied off, you can go ahead and use your scissors and snip. I think scissors was one thing I did not mention on my material video, but you're going to need scissors. Slipped my mind. Okay, so that is the cutting, starting and stopping method. Now, and the triangle method. So now I'm going to go down the tree, and these are all round stitches. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and show you how I go from each section. So I'm going to start now with a back stitch. So I'm going to go through what I just did on the back and pull until I get to the end of my tail. And I'm just going to leave that tail as it is. I'm not going to use glue or tape or make a knot. It's just going to hang out there because just doing back stitching like this will secure it enough where it's going to be fine. It's not going anywhere. Okay, so that's my third way to start stitching. Okay, now to go to the next section, this area, this little round area is going to go all into this main hole. So it does not matter where you start. If you start close to where your thread is, so here's the back. If I were to start next to where my thread is, like this, I'm using less thread. Could you start all the way over here and do that? Sure. You're going to use up just a couple more centimeters of thread, so it just kind of depends on the project, on your mood, on your attention span. It just depends. And now, you guys, we've come to our first knot. And now this knot probably isn't even going to be bad because I'm using DMC thread and I conditioned my thread. So to do with knots, I just kind of do a little bit of picking with my needle and see what I can unlodge. Most of the time it's kind of like a loopy knot, and if I pull one way or the other, it gets better. This one is not perfect. Well, even when you use good thread and everything and condition it, you still get knots. And I'm just right now demonstrating that it's okay to cut. I am tonight filming a video. I got work in the morning, and I know this is going to be a long video. I'm not going to take the time to pick out that knot. If that makes you mad, sorry. You probably, I don't know, maybe you can relate. Okay, we're going to start again with our back stitch. And my thread's shorter now, so I have to just do that one more time. There we go. And then I'll pinch it, back stitch again. There's number 2, and we'll do a number 3. Ta-da. Okay. Then I will start with that section. So I'm going to go up there, or outside, which is this outside loop, and in through the center. Up through the outside and down through the center. Over and over. I hope that this video is helping you if you are new to stitching, or if you are a stitching expert. Maybe you're just watching this and looking for new tips. So I'm hoping that this is a helpful video for you all who are stitchers or want to be stitchers. Or maybe you could send this video to a friend and show them how to stitch like this, and then you could all stitch together. Wouldn't that be fun? Okay, that little section is finished. I'm going to go to the next section across and do the same design. If you watched part 1 and forgot to write your comment or question in the comments, you can add it to this one. I do check on YouTube comments almost every day, at least I try to. So do know that if you're going to take the time to leave a comment or a question, I will try my best to answer and write back to you. And if you don't have a question and you just like the video, you can let me know in the comments too. Doesn't have to be a question, I guess. Okay, now I've done the second design. Almost a knot there. And I'm just going to continue my way down, and you're going to see my thread change colors as well. Now this is a diamond shape, so it's going around in a diamond area into this middle hole. So I would still call this a round stitch because you're going around the center point, but it is shaped like a diamond and not round. So there's the circle stitch, the fan stitch, and then we're going to do the back stitch. We're going to even do some cross stitching, and then there's one where we just have to follow the lines that Spellbinders gives us, so stay tuned. Okay, for the rest of this tree, I'm just going to keep stitching and I'm going to chat. So if you want to skip the chatting, you can go ahead, but I'm going to chat as I finish this. So if you are new to my channel, hello and welcome. I am Justine, and I've been stitching on cards for a while and on YouTube for I think a year and a half now. I think so. And I'm a kindergarten teacher. I live in Minnesota, and crafting is my jam. I love crafting. I love stitching and glimmering. I love BetterPressing. All things card making I am all about. So I have a Facebook group that's called the Spellbinders Maker Group that I run by myself, and I have a few moderators, but I started that group. It's not run by Spellbinders, is my point here. And it's basically started as a fan page for Spellbinders, and it's grown into still a fan page, but also a really fun, crafty online community. So if you want to be part of that, you can go ahead and join our group. Again, it's called the Spellbinder Maker Group. So that's really fun. And then I said I loved better pressing, which if you don't know is a technique with the BetterPress system. And Melanie Smith, my very good Crafty friend, if you're not subscribed to her, you're going to want to. I will try to remember to leave her link in the comments of this video. Let's see. I'm going to write myself a note because, you know, bird brain. Okay. And her and I run BetterPress Babes, which is a really fun Facebook group as well, but for all things BetterPress. So we just had 1,000 members on that group. The Spellbinders Maker group, I think, has 8,000, I think, at this point. So there's bound to be somebody who can go ahead and inspire you to make some beautiful stuff. And maybe you've bought stitching dies in the past and you've thought, oh, I just don't know. I bought that, but I don't know what I'm doing and I don't know where to even start. Make sure that you try it out. Go ahead and try it, even with a small flower like I started with. Start small and go to more complicated things, and I think you'll like the results. Reminds me of like, it's Men's Warehouse. You're gonna like the way you look. Anyway, I love how you can see the variegated colors here really starting to change as I go down this card. So this is just really turning out pretty and I'm loving it. Now I'm in my next section here, just stitching away. I think my all-time favorite stitch die is the stitched ovals, which was a club item I think 2 years ago at this point. I loved that because I could stamp any stamp I wanted to on the back or on the front of that, and it could work for any occasion. Christmas, sympathy, birthday, anything. And I just love that die. I've used it so many times. I don't know if it's on the Spellbinders website or not, but when I am making the links for this video, I will see if it is around. And if it is, I will link it for you. This Christmas tree die, I've gotten all of its use out of it already. I mean, it still can be used many times, but I've made so many of these Christmas trees and turned them into really pretty Christmas ornaments that are paper, and I've sold all of them. So I think they were a hit, which is another really fun thing to do with stitched elements, is to turn them into ornaments. And Spellbinders even had a 12 days of stitching, or Stitchmas, I think is what they called it, and you got an ornament to stitch every day. So it had 12 stitching cutting dies in it. All right, well, my thread is all done, so I'll just leave that be. I think I'm going to use tape for this because I'm feeling like I'm on a roll with my project, and I don't really feel like back stitching with teeny tiny piece here. With a teeny tiny piece, but a tape will do. And I'm not even going to cut the tail because it doesn't need to be cut. Okay, now this is what I was talking about before, where it matters what end you put the needle on when you're doing variegated floss. So here I want to keep it dark and go from light to dark to light again. I want that ombre look. So I'm going to go ahead and start with my darker side of my floss because I want it to stay darker here as I start up again. But because this is going to be the part that stitches first, I'm going to put my needle through the light side. And I will just do some simple back stitching to start my project. And of course that happens on camera. Sometimes I pull and I'm not holding my project enough and it just goes flying around, which no big deal. Okay. Next section, going in here. I told you this would be a long video, so I hope you're with me still. Anyway, I am going to finish the rest of this, and I'm going to put some music on as I stitch, so you don't have to just listen to me babble along. different pictures of my cards of asking how to do it, or, you know, is there a trick for that one, or things like that. And just know that every time Spellbinders releases a new die cutting plate for stitching, I will have a tutorial for it. Sometimes it's sent to me because I am an influencer with them, and sometimes I will go ahead and buy it myself, but I always have a tutorial on it on my channel. And sometimes there are some dies that are really complicated, like this one. I'm not going to do this here today. I do have a full demo on that one on my channel, but it is rather confusing. It is the Argyle one, and there's a lot of little steps, and if you make one wrong stitch, it kind of throws things off. So I have a really good tip for that one. Same with the bee wings. I will be doing one bee wing here in a couple of minutes, but there's a lot of dies that are pretty simple. Like this one's just a lot of round stitching and triangle stitches, but there are some dies that are a little bit more complicated. So if you're ever needing a tutorial, check my channel. I probably have something for you. Okay, now this was the thread that I had my knot with before. I'm going to go ahead and put it in my thread catcher for now, and it kills me here a little bit, but I do have to pull out more thread for the rest of this project. I am just going to pull a little bit because it's only maybe about 15 stitches left, but I gotta do it. So this is a great opportunity to show you splitting thread again. This reminds me of my 3rd grade teacher, Mr. Morris. And I say we, a couple of my classmates and I would always ask a million questions because I think, you know, it's just destined for me to be a teacher. But anyway, we'd ask all these questions, and poor Mr. Morris, he would say, we'd ask a lot of the why questions, and he'd say, okay, ladies, you're splitting hairs. And every time I split thread, I think of poor Mr. Morris answering all of our questions. But bless him. Anyway, we're just gonna keep her moving. Now you can see the back of my project is not beautiful by any means. There's tape there. There's little threads hanging up here and there. It's fine because look at the front. And it doesn't need to be fancy on the back. If that makes you happy, you make your back beautiful. I don't really care about making the back pretty, so I just don't waste my time doing it. Again, just being frank. Anyway, I'm almost done with this tree. It is taking me a while because I'm going a little bit slower than normal, at least a lot of it. I went a little bit slower. I ran into 3 knots along the way, which such is life. But usually if I'm stitching something like this, where I've done this tree probably 20 times now, it's pretty mindless for me, and I love that because as a teacher I make 1,000,001 decisions before 8 a.m. and the decision fatigue is real. So I need something like this where I can just stitch and kind of get in the zone. So now my tree is done, and I can add it onto my project. So you can see with the thread, is it perfectly flat? No. Doesn't matter? No. You can go ahead and add this on to your project. You can use foam tape or foam squares or circles, or you can use good old liquid glue, which is usually what I end up using because I like it. I know it works well for me. So I'm going to grab my reverse tweezers and get to gluing. Now there is a trick for gluing with stitching. I of course use Barely Art liquid glue. I always start with adding glue to the big stitching areas. So that's kind of those center points or the triangles, just to get some of that glue on those fibers. And if there's any tails like these that are sticking up, I try to kind of push them down to the glue a little bit. And if they're very unruly, I will just snip them. So now that I have glue all on the main areas, then I focus on the edge. Now you want to be careful not to make too much of a mess with your glue, so I'm just going to lightly put glue on the edge and then it will go right on to my project. I am using the gold mirror cardstock from Spellbinders and an embossing folder. This one is the E3D014, which is one of my favorites for Christmas because it creates a focal point for something like this to land on, which I love. So I'm going to go ahead and put it actually just in the middle because that is what I'm doing today. So stick it on just like that. There's no secret tip for that at all. You kind of have a second to move it around if you need to, but it will dry clear. So if any glue smushes out, you know, life moves on. But you can go ahead and stick something heavy on top, and that will help with any kind of billowing. And this is kind of a double help because this is a magnet in here and my glass mat is magnetized. So it's putting even more pressure onto that, which is fantastic. Okay, now for the sentiment, I'm going to put it on the tree because I'm feeling like that's what I want to do, I think. Maybe I'll change my mind and put it under, but I'm going to use foam squares regardless. So I'm going to go ahead and pop those on. These foam squares are from Dollar Tree. They do the job. They're kind of annoying for taking off the release paper, but you know what? It's fine. They work. The fancier ones from bigger companies like Simon Says or Spellbinders are way easier to work with, but sometimes you're balling on a budget, and this is me using what I got. So we're going to do that. So you can kind of see here that it is slightly a little bit annoying for releasing that. Is it impossible to use? No, you can do that. Same with me. Okay, and I'm using a Christmas sentiment. This is from the All You Need Sentiments, and I glimmered it with gold foil. Isn't that just beautiful? I love foil. Anyway, I'm going to put that on my tree, or maybe under my tree, because I'm going to add bling bling for the ornaments. Okay, I think I'm going to use red ones. There are red in here. Hooray. Anyway, if you're a foil person, make sure to check out the Foil Snobs Club on Facebook. It is a perfect place for all things foil and some more things like crafting, and I put my stitching stuff on there, so that's really neat. That is run by Tracy and Nancy, which they are amazing and so inspirational. They are very creative ladies, and there's a whole bunch of members on there. I don't know what they're up to, what numbers that we're up to on the Foil Snobs Club, but I should know. But I'm a moderator for Nancy and Tracy on there, so that's another fun thing that's part of my life. And I'm really grateful for so many crafty people that are so sweet on the Foil Snobs Club. They are just very kind people. So people from all over the world. I know that there's one person in particular who comments on almost everything I post there, and it's in Swedish. Her comments are all in Swedish, and I find that so fun, and I love hitting the translate button so I see what she says, but I love seeing what she wrote in like actual her own language, which is Swedish, so shout out to you. Okay, anyway, there is my finished Christmas card. Isn't that fun? Okay, well, I said I would do 2 finished projects, so I did. Now I'm going to show you some other stitching that's a little bit different. So the round and the triangle stitch are basically the main ones, but let's get funky and do some new ones. So I don't know, should we start? Let's do the back stitch next. It's less funky, but I don't even know why I said funky, but we're just going to go with it. Anyway, this is DMC Floss. This is $7.99. I'm sure there's a cutesy color or name for this, but I would call this one Periwinkle Blue if I had to give it a name. And there's not much thread on that, so it's a little deceptive, but it looks like I just cleaned house. Okay, so I'm going to separate my thread like usual. and then we can get started. Now this back stitch is really fun for creating borders. So I'm going to use it on this little pocket that you see here. But you could also do it on other projects, like on the Christmas tree. Around the round stitch, you can make a back stitch with some lines. So if I can find the footage or a picture, I will pop a picture on the screen of what that looks like with some leaves. And I outlined the leaf with the back stitch after I did a round stitch on there. Alright, my floss is conditioned. Let us begin. I am going to just snip the end here because that part did not get conditioned and I don't want to deal with a frayed mess. Now this die I am going to use for some tools. So remember I talked about Nancy Stamps. She made a collection with Spellbinders last March, I think, or May, last spring. We'll just say spring. And I loved her set. It had a whole bunch of tools. It's the essential tools. And I am going to make a Father's Day card, and I don't know if it's for my dad. So Dad, if you're watching, act surprised when I give you the card. Or we'll just say for a special person in my life who might be named Gary. Anyway, I'm going to put tools in this and make a stitch card that is masculine. So anyway, I taped my tail, and I'm going to do this top area first before I get to this little zigzaggy, but it is a very basic stitch and it's the same throughout the whole project. So let's just begin, shall we? Actually, I'm going to do this side because this is where my needle is. Okay, so you're just going to go up through one hole, down through another, and that made a teeny tiny stitch. And then you're going to go up the next one, so hole number 3, and then you're going to go back down hole number 2, and that made 2 stitches. And then you're going to go up hole 4, down hole 3. Basically, you are going forward and back, and that's why they call it the back stitch, because you're going back. So it is very repetitive, but it gets the job done, and it makes a nice outline. And for something like this, a pocket is normally stitched on clothes anyway, so it really makes sense to stitch something like this. And again, just up and back, like the 2-step. Forward and back. And I'll just keep going around. And I'm going to speed this part up a little bit now after I'm done talking, just so this video is not 3 hours long. I kind of anticipated it being long, but not this long. Okay, I'm going to speed it up and add some music. I'm just going to go around this whole thing. I finished my pocket. Wow, that was a lot of backstitching, and I think that's probably the fastest I've ever backstitched before was this video. So there's that, and you saw me go even faster because I am going to speed that up when I edit this video. But there we go. I'm going to have this set aside on my desk for a special project for my dad. And this die was the inspiration for the thread catcher. That this die came with a whole bunch of stitch flowers and leaves. So isn't that just so sweet? I just adore this little pocket. Okay, let's move on to the cross stitching now. And now you're probably wondering where this came from. If you're a Spellbinders person, this is not a Spellbinders die. This is actually from Waffle Flower, which is another company that has stitch dies. So this one is called the Stitchable Mitten Die, and there it is in all of its glory, and it is a basically cross stitch. So I will show you how to do that. If you have cross stitched in the past, you probably know what to do, but there you go. I was going to use this really obnoxious orange thread to do this with because I thought it would be easier to visualize what I'm doing. And I certainly am not going to finish this whole mitten on camera. Cross stitching takes a lot more time. So I am just going to do a couple stitches and just show you the technique, and then we'll move on. So let's do it how you're supposed to do it first, and then I will show you a large scale version of that. I'm just going to use a little bit of thread, so I don't need a crazy long thread. It's just a little guide today for this project. I'm going to go ahead and do back stitching into my original stitches here from the last time I stitched on this, just to kind of give myself a little bit of something as I start here today. So there we go. My tail's secure enough. Okay, so when you cross stitch, you're going to go one direction and then you're going to go the other way, and you're going to make these tiny little X's. So I'm actually just going to do the line over here just so you can see a little bit better away from the black. So you're going to make diagonal stitches, and you're going to go all the way across, or as maybe about halfway through my thread, and then I'll come the other direction. But this is a really fun to make your own patterns with. So here I have black and orange floss, but you could use many different colors. You could use variegated. You could make a little section like this, and then you could go ahead and add other colors around it. So you could make even letters or numbers on this mitten. It's just kind of fun. So I just wanted to include it in this video. If you haven't tried any of the cross stitching dies from Waffle Flower, maybe you want to. Okay, so that's pretty good. I'm going to just stick with that. And now this is where the cross part comes in. So then I'm going to go up through this hole and then go diagonal the other direction. And that makes a little X or a little cross. And then I'm going to go down or up through that second hole and diagonal again. Up through that one, down, diagonal again. And you see those teeny tiny little X's there make the cross stitch. And if this is your jam, there is a lot of projects you can do with cross stitching. So maybe just take a trip to your craft store and go nuts. But I like doing this with paper. That's my thing. So I'm just going to stick with that for now. But both of my grandmas were really into cross stitching, and I have a love for that, probably like in my bones for stitching from them. Okay, so there is a look at the cross stitching. I'll show really close up. You can see those teeny little X's, and they look pretty cute, don't they? Anyway, we're just going to move on from that because this is a long project and this is already a super long video. Let's go to the wings. So if you saw, this month's club subscription is the bee. Now let me check my calendar. Okay, this is working out so perfectly because this day, when this is released, is the last day that you can sign up for the club subscriptions for the bee. Now, if you want the bee, you got to do it today. So I will link that in the description. I did a whole video about the bee already, but I'm going to tell you how I'm going to stitch with this wing die, because this is not a circle stitch. This is not a triangle stitch. It is almost random, but we're going to break it into sections. So if you can see here, you can see the lines on that wing, and everywhere that there's a line is where thread needs to go. So it looks kind of daunting at first, but Spellbinders helped us by making those lines. So I'll show you the die itself. And they have little lines on the die so you know where to stitch. And there they are there. They're not cutting lines, but they are guidelines, and they're going to be covered up with stitching. So basically when I stitched this the first time, I just kind of did it randomly. And then I kind of got smart. And I went ahead and looked at this die in sections. So I thought of this section from here to here as a row, and then here to here a row, here to here a row. So these are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sections, and that helped me tremendously. Now this one I basically am going to divide into 1, 2, 3, 4 little sections. So let's go ahead and start that. And the bee is so darn cute. So if you haven't seen that, I'll pop a picture on the screen of my finished product, but there's a lot of really fun examples with the bee this month. So be sure to check that out. And then if you are wanting to build up your stitching stash, I think that subscription is a really great way to start. It's $25 a month. And like I said in part 1, if $25 a month is daunting, which I do not judge you at all, I think that is, a good bit amount of money. If that's too much for you, buy that alphabet for your first name and you're going to stitch. Now that thread conditioner is making my glass mat a little waxy, but whatever. We're going to clean it up later after the video. Okay. So like I said, section 1, section 2, section 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 sections. Okay. So again, I'm just going to follow those lines. So this die is another one that you kind of have to pay attention to. And now I'm going to show you the 4th way I start, which is basically tucking my tail as I go. So I'm going to just hold this the whole time, and my stitches will hold that in, and I don't have to do any extra work. Now that's kind of an advanced way to go. If you're starting out, use tape. No one will judge you, I promise. No one's even going to see it. So use your tape. Okay, there's section 1 already done. Just like that. Now I'm going to go to the section 2. So I'm going to go to this one and go across, and then from there across to here, 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 here. I'm just going to follow those lines. So there's a teeny line here. Now on my example bee that I did with the monthly club, I missed some of these stitches, and I think that it makes my bee look even more unique. So if your stitching is not perfect, it's okay. It's your art, it's your fun. Just enjoy it, If you make a mistake, it doesn't matter. Again, no one's going to judge you. They're going to go, wow, oh my goodness, you just stitched on a card, that's gorgeous. Or you can go ahead and frame it, and it's a piece of art. So just to have fun. That's my biggest tip for stitching. Keep trying and have fun. And if you need a tutorial, I got you. So check out my channel. Like I said, I have a tutorial for basically every stitching die. I think I have not missed one of them. So that makes me really happy to know that. Okay, so section 1, section 2 are done. Now remember that tail that I had? Look at that. It is secure. It's not coming out. It's not even going to move. So that's lovely. Now I can go ahead and move on and finish the rest of my wing. And again, I'm just following the lines. I don't see a line here, so I'm not going to go across there. My next line's there. And I'm kind of doing some back stitching here, but just kind of following the lines basically. which every stitch die from Spellbinders has the lines. If you use a thicker paper, you're going to see them. But if you remember from part 1, it doesn't matter what paper you use. You just have to be kind of thoughtful about your paper choice. Again, if you're going to do a wing, I think it would be really fun to do a vellum wing. You can do stitching with vellum. You can do stitching with thick cardstock. It does not matter. It just depends on your aggression with this pulling of the knot. You know, are you going to rip it out or are you going to be gentle? So you just have to think before you go nuts. But I know everyone's like, what paper, what paper, what paper? It does not matter. Just saying. I do have a special love for the Spellbinders cardstock just because I think their paper is vibrant and colorful and thick and good for glimmering, but whatever. That's just my thoughts. Anyway, I did have this one up here because I just wanted to tell you, I don't even know. Oh, I do know. Okay. For background stitching, like this. This is a background plate. This is a full A2 sized piece. Now, if you want to go ahead and stitch something like this, you're going to take your paper like so. This is already cut down to A2, and you're going to try to run it through your die cutting machine, and it's going to twist, and it's going to end up turning out crooked. And you're going to say, well, how can I do that? I have a tip for you with tape. Do not mind the mess. We're having fun. Okay. You're going to take your tape like this, and you're going to take your stitching die and put it on the front and just leave kind of a skinny edge that's going to fold over. Like that. And now the sticky part is ready to stick on the paper. So I'm going to put my paper down, line it up just so, fold over that tape on each side, and now that is not going to wiggle. So when I send it through my die cutting machine, it's going to cut perfectly, just like this one. So that is my tip for you. And then I left some tape on here because I wanted to mention that you can just take your reverse tweezers or whatever tweezers you have and just peel that tape off and you'll be all set. So that is my big tip for background dies. So once again, if you have any questions at all about stitching, no question is too small at all. I can help you with anything. Make sure that you watch part 1 if you haven't yet. And be sure to join the Facebook group, Spellbinders Maker Group. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed. If you've learned something, let me know in the comments as well. I just want to be a resource for you for crafting, so do not be afraid to ask questions. I'm a teacher. I get a lot of questions anyway, so I'm used to it. Anyway, we'll see you next time, and bye, crafty friend. I forgot to mention in this video, I do have 2 playlists on my channel called Stitching on Cards and the Monthly Club. So if you want to make sure that you see all of those videos, you can go ahead and add those playlists to your YouTube account. Anyway, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.